The Intel 10900K or 10850K. The 10850K might as well be called the 10899K. It's a better deal, just buy that one. Don't be afraid if you can't get the 10900K. Or even the 10600K. Although, for the over-the-top build that I've got set up for today, no, you need to go with like the 10850K or better for this build. And you definitely want a K-series CPU. Intel 10th generation, fastest for gaming. I reached out to EK and they said, hey, we partnered with MSI. Look at that. MSI has a monoblock Z490 motherboard. And you know what that means? It means it's time for a build. Woo! To go with this build, if that doesn't whet your appetite, I've got the Sabrent Rocket Q4 NVMe 4.0 with the redonkulous Rocket copper heat pipe heatsink because, good lord, mostly you don't even need a heatsink on the NVMe. Like the motherboard heatsink is fine, the monoblock is going to be fine in our case, but you know, if your case has really terrible airflow or you just want to be sure, it's not bad. Now for our over-the-top RGB build, what case? Well, you can probably already see. What's the Vector, Victor? Roger. Huh? This is the Fractal Vector. It's been languishing on my bench, waiting for a build, waiting eagerly for a build, and I can't think of a more ridiculous over-the-top RGB monoblock build than for this. Now I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, that's the motherboard and case. What are you gonna do for the pump and everything else? Did EK send that? No. And in fact, I got the pump that's used from eBay. Some slight shipping damage, but we got 3 Vardar fans and a 360 millimeter radiator in here straight from eBay. Total haul, less than $150 with shipping. It was like 135-ish, I think, like 138, 139, something like that, which is pretty awesome considering this is gonna be a custom loop. Now, I did have to spend a little bit of money on top of that to get some right angle fittings and a couple extra barb fittings to get the cheap barb fittings. I really want to try automotive parts in a custom loop build, but that's maybe a video for another day. Let's get started building by taking a look at what's in the box. What do you get for the price of a decent used car? Whew. Look at that. All right. You get the block, carbon fiber and plexi, plated nickel, not bad. You also get the EK leak tester. So this is pretty awesome. Normally you have to buy this separately. This little doodad you plug into your loop and it's a pressure gauge when you're setting it up. And this is something you can use to make sure that your loop is not gonna leak. So you can use this leak tester with just air and see if your loop is actually sealed properly before you actually put fluid in it, which will help minimize the chances of leakage. Now, if you are doing a custom loop for the first time, I definitely don't recommend getting used stuff from eBay because there's lots of little doodads and accessories and stuff you need. Tools. I happen to have the tools already on hand, so it's not really a big deal for me. But if you pick up the EK kit, it comes with the fittings and it comes with a tool for making sure the fittings tighten down correctly, a hex wrench, but it's sort of a large hex wrench. You put it down through the fittings and tighten the fittings that way, but you don't want to over tighten it because you'll strip the threads because it's just soft brass. It's a really soft metal. You just need to water seal it. It doesn't need to be super tight. It also comes with all of the stuff that you need, the tubing and the block and everything else. If you do buy like the EK Performance 360 kit, the only thing that it comes with that you're not actually going to use is the block, because this is a much better block than the block that comes with the Performance 360. For one, this block also covers the VRMs on the motherboard, so you're cooling not just your CPU but also your VRMs, which is pretty cool if you're gonna, you know, do the 5.3 gigahertz overclock. 5.2 is more realistic. 5.3 is like, you know, if you look on siliconlottery.com, there's not a lot of the 10900Ks that are stable past 5.1 gigahertz. Mine is a little, 5.3 gigahertz is pushing it. 5.3 gigahertz is okay for gaming, not so much for Prime 95. So, you know, be happy with 5.1-ish all core on your 10900K, and your 10850K is like 25 megahertz slower, so again, the 10850K, that's the one you want. It's surprisingly light when there's not 17 pounds of metal on it to use as a heatsink. All right, so first up, we've got our rear I/O. We've got a combo PS2 mouse and keyboard port, 2 USB 2 ports, HDMI display port, and USB-C. There's a 20 gigabit USB Type-C, and then we've got 4 more USB 3 ports, 2 10 gig, 2 5 gig. And then we've got our 2.5 gig LAN that's built right in. The 2.5 gig LAN is the Realtek 8125B implementation. It's not the Intel implementation, which is actually fine because the Intel 2.5 gig LAN is sort of bugged right now. We got the Intel Wi-Fi 6, which is a good Wi-Fi solution, combination Wi-Fi Bluetooth. Comes with a great antenna in the box. And then we've got our Realtek ALC 1220 base audio solution with the optical SPDIF out. As you can see from our motherboard layout, we have 2 reinforced X16 slot. Those will run at X16 X0 electrical or X8 X8. We've got 1 full-size slot at the bottom that is physically wired for X8 but is actually X4 electrical. Then we've got 2 NVMe slots. In terms of other motherboard connectors, there's a ton of connectivity here. At the bottom edge of the motherboard, we've got our front panel header connector, our 5050 RGB header, 2 4-pin fan headers, an RS-232 serial port, 2 USB 2.0 headers for a total of 4 USB 2 headers. We also got our front panel connections, including an RGB LED switch, so you can kill that if you want to. At the front edge of the motherboard, we've got 6 gigabit per second SATA ports, another USB 5 gigabit port, USB Type-C for your front panel connection, your motherboard power connector, 4 more 4-pin fan headers, which is awesome. These is your system fan and pump headers, the pump headers in the top right. And finally, a 7th fan connector right at the back edge of the motherboard for your rear exhaust fan. In terms of power input for your CPU, this motherboard has a combination 4-pin and 8-pin, so that's 600 watts up to right into the CPU. Of course, with our water block and the VRM cooling here is going to be more than adequate. One thing that you will need to pay special attention to is that the motherboard comes with spongy thermal pads, and you will want to install the spongy thermal pads on top of the chokes and VRMs for your motherboard cooling solution. So the monoblock is going to sit here on top of the CPU, and you're going to have to install the thermal pads on the bottom there so that you get proper thermal contact between the monoblock and the CPU. And then you use regular old thermal paste for the interface between the CPU and the monoblock. See, the thermal paste in the CPU is much closer. It's basically metal on metal in an ideal world, with the thermal paste filling in the gaps from CPU to monoblock. But you're going to have to rely on the thermal pads for the mechanical interface between the VRMs and the chokes for the motherboard. In terms of other accessories in the box, EK does include some Ectotherm, which is perfectly reasonable thermal paste compound, so that's nice. You get the aforementioned thermal pads, which you will have to cut to size. I recommend a sharp knife to be able to do that. A smooth blade, definitely don't try to use serrated. You get your motherboard installation manual, your funky awesome MSI case badge, the MSI set of cable labels, some other MSI accessory bundles, your driver CD. You can join the MSI reward program. They'll actually give you cash back. So like if you buy one of these and you leave a review, sometimes you can get a gift card or a free Steam game or something like that. There's a thank you card, quick installation guide, all the SATA and digital RGB cables that you'll ever need, and the aforementioned really awesome Wi-Fi antenna. So in terms of motherboard bundles, you did pay a premium for this motherboard. You can definitely expect that in the box. All right, let's get building. This motherboard from MSI is the MPG Z490 Carbon EKX. EK because partnership with EK and MSI. Lightning 4 support. Lightning 4 means that it's Comet Lake ready. Whenever Comet Lake will go ahead and come out, just any time now. Where's my muscly armed throwing processor? It's like Emerald. It's like, just bam, we'll add a little bit of carbon fiber cooling plate thing. They really want to make sure you don't forget to peel. Also, very important, look, these little plastic spacers, don't accidentally knock those off. Those are critical. You need those. Otherwise, it's crunch. All right, so look, 2 thermal pads. Measure twice or 5 or 7 times, and cut once. If you're very careful, you can use 1 piece, but don't be stingy. Use 2 pieces if you need to. Please, please, please remember the components on the motherboard are smaller than a grain of rice and incredibly delicate. So please, please, please be very careful with your motherboard and do not damage it. I'm playing it a little fast and loose with my Swiss Army knife, so just be careful. Do a good job. This looks really good. Now what we gotta do is clean off our CPU with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on a paper towel and lay down a fresh layer of ectotherm. Sounds like something from Ghostbusters too. Basically it's gonna go like this. We gotta line up our holes. It's a little tricky because the carbon fiber thing on the side overlaps the block just a hair. You don't want to go too tight on these. You really don't. And again, be careful of surface mount components on this, because it's real easy to damage these delicate microelectronics from the space age. Now my kit had one extra big screw and one extra little screw and some extra washers. I'm gonna put those back in the little baggie along with the spare ectotherm in case I ever gotta tear this down again. Sometimes I do like to double up on washers just because sometimes, you know, manufacturing tolerances being what they are, sometimes you get a screw that's a little bit long and it kind of bottoms out. You can use an extra washer to give you a little bit more spacing if you feel like that's what's happening. This is your first custom loop build. Don't worry too much about that. That's something you get when you've got a little bit more seasoning. Now these screws on the sides, they hold the monoblock to your VRM. So it's just as important to get those good and in contact with your VRMs as well. Otherwise your VRMs will overheat and you'll never get a good overclock out of your processor. It might not even run at stock speeds if it's not making good contact with your VRMs, the monoblock that is. So you don't want to tighten each screw down all the way. You want to just tighten it a little bit. Try to tighten them all evenly. But definitely start with your processor screws. And there we are. You want to sort of look at your board edge on, make sure that nothing is amiss. The board should not be warped or visibly bent or anything like that. Now for this kind of a build, it's easier to do the assembly on the motherboard before you actually mount it in the case, including adding the fittings and installing the memory and the M.2. Obviously the only choice for a build like this is the fractal defined vector. Look at that blackness. It's got exactly what I need. Tempered glass, USB-C, and tempered glass. And pogo pins for the front. Oh, the front's heavy. All that tempered glass. Did I mention this monoblock has rainbow? Rainbow. Wow! The build! The build continues. Kung Fu, the build continues. And I've lost the box of vector screws. In today's episode of All My Circuits. I think I said 7 CPU fan headers. It's actually 8 counting the CPU, which is tucked under the monoblock. So it's a little inconvenient to get to when you get the monoblock in place, but hey, it's there. The MSI Carbon EKX. What build could possibly be more carboniferous? I don't think I used that word correctly. Well, after my stand-up comedy teacher suggested they change my medication, they'll be a little less humor impaired. He changed his career because I'm not very good at anything. It's fine. The next piece of our build is the Sabrent 4 terabyte rocket. Now they've got these things all the way up to 8 terabytes in capacity. This is NVMe 4.0, PCIe Gen 4x4 solid state drive. Now this is higher capacity flash cells, which means that it will slow down a little bit as it wears. But I've got a full review of this, full benchmark, full disclosure, and another video that's coming, or is already out. I'm not sure, I can't see the future. But this one's for this build. Full disclosure, again, Sabrent sent me this one after I asked questions about some that I picked up at Micro Center, so it's sort of weird. The ones that I picked up at Micro Center were the 1 and 2 terabyte variants. This is the 4 terabyte variant, so we'll get a look at the performance characteristic of the 1, 2, and 4 terabyte versions of this SSD. You might imagine with 4 terabytes, it's gonna take a little longer to fill. It's gonna take a little longer for you to notice. Look at that. It's so pretty. Now, if you are upgrading from something else and you've already got your operating system installed, this comes with the Acronis cloning software so that you can clone it onto something else. Don't forget the redonkulous copper heat pot cooler. Again, check out that separate video. This has a copper foil sticker on top, so it helps a little bit, and because of the monoblock and the rest of the cooling situation and that, I'm not going to use the heat pop cooler with this NVMe, but if you doubt your cooling ability of your case and your airflow, definitely use the heat pot thing. Did you find that appealing? For memory for this build, that's going to be G.Skill Trident Z 3800. Now we need a radiator and fans. Fabulous. Thought I was going to say fantastic, didn't you? Smells like somebody's house that had a lot of carpet and a dog. Oh, this is a thick radiator. I mean, the radiator part's not thick, but it's gonna make our drive bay situation interesting in the front of this. Now, the Vector does come with the stuff to have a vent here in the top, so I could mount the radiator in the top. That's totally an option, but I'm not gonna do that. It's gonna be close. I think we might have enough room for the fans and the rad in the front. Wow, there's not even 1 millimeter to spare, but that's gonna work. Now, I'm putting the tubes at the top here. Don't Gamers Nexus me, because the pump is gonna be at the top too, so it'll be fine. You guys. Steve literally told you not to do that. And that only applies to AIOs anyway. I mean, it's for AIOs. This is not AIO, this is a custom loop. What's wrong with you people? Don't answer that. You guys, I know what's wrong. You guys need to have your medication changed too. That's gonna work well. So let's Cookie Monster these fans. Unlike Cookie Monster, let's not leave a mess for the cleaning lady, shall we? Oh no. Sorry, Captain. AYY, LMAO. It really does smell like that stuff that you put on carpet. It's like, I'm gonna vacuum the carpet. I'm gonna put this baby powder like stuff into the carpet because it smells too much like fire retardant chemicals. So the next thing with this build is gonna become, where do you hide the pump? Well, because it's a tempered glass top, I wanna mount the pump something like this. It's hidden behind this side plate, but I can still pop the top off and get to the top of the reservoir and fill it up. And also note the top of the reservoir is higher than the highest part of the radiator, so even though my tubes are coming out the top, it doesn't really matter because the reservoir is higher, a little bit higher than the radiator, and the pump is also lower than, like, there's always going to be water sitting on the pump, so there's not going to be an air bubble in the pump ever. Fortunately, Fractal gives us some options. So, mounting the pump. Fractal has this multi-bracket thing, which will fit on a 120mm fan mount, and you can mount all kinds of stuff. The problem is that for like the EK performance pumps, none of these screw holes really line up with it. And I wanted to mount it sideways on my door. So I ended up just making a 3D printable adapter, and you can see I've got my pump kind of mounted right here. It's high enough that it's gonna clear the video card, and this side also makes a nice support for the video card. In this case, that MSI 2080 Super, the reason for right now, at least, to get a baseline to compare to more graphics cards later. This is a little longer than the space, but it's gonna go here no problem. and where I've got my bracket for my pump. You know, I can unscrew the top, take the tempered glass off. I can unscrew the top from here, load it down, and I've got my loop put together. I've got mismatched fittings, and I used one right angle fitting to clear my pump. It's not an ideal situation. I am gonna revisit this. I'm just kind of in a hurry because I need to test this 10th generation CPU in the 2080 Super because the deadline's here. So that's our build, sag-free, negative sag even. And you get to enjoy lovely B-roll and benchmarks of it. It's a 2080 Super. It performs exactly like a 2080 Super would. This is a fresh installation of Windows 2004 with a fresh installation of the latest NVIDIA drivers as of 9/12/2020, which is what I'm going to use for the benchmarks and the review and the comparison, like how much of an upgrade is the 3000 series GPUs over the 2080 Super from MSI, because this is, you know, the high-end implementation of the 2080 Super, because the MSI card is ridiculous and it's really quiet and pretty awesome. This has been a custom loop build. It's the Intel 10900K, again with the MSI Carbon EKX. It's full EK cooling loop thing. No leaks so far, knock on wood. And this is how this thing sounds at ambient. It's basically whisper quiet. So that's been another level 1 build. I hope you're looking forward to the 3000 series reviews as much as I am. This has been a lot of fun to build. I'm Wendell, this is level 1. This has been another level 1 build. Be sure to check out the second video in the series, which has the 3000 series GPU. But if you're curious, if you're watching this video because you saw that video and you wondered how I built the system, this is the test system. The only thing we're doing is swapping the GPU. Now you know. I'm Wendell, this is level 1. I'm signing out. See you later.